I have written many poems, more than I could accurately count if someone asked me to. Words have always been the place where I put things that have no other container, feelings too large for conversation, truths too complicated for direct statement, things I needed to release without fully surrendering them, and over the years those poems have traveled far beyond wherever I intended them to go. They have been read and interpreted and debated and pulled apart by people looking for meanings I placed there and meanings I did not. That is the nature of words once they leave you. They stop belonging only to the person who wrote them. But there was one poem that was different from everything else I have ever written. One that was not written for the world or for release or for any of the reasons that poetry usually moves through me onto a page. This one was written for a single person, one specific person. And I knew when I wrote it that if her identity was ever understood clearly by the people who read it, nothing would be the same afterward. My name is Sheikh Hamdan, and I am going to tell you who she was. The poem arrived in a moment of complete private necessity, not constructed, not shaped carefully over time the way some of my writing develops. It came the way things come when you are not trying to produce something but simply cannot contain what is happening inside you for one moment longer. I wrote it in a single sitting in a silence so complete that the words felt like the only sound in the world, and when it was finished, I sat with it for a long time before I shared it, because I understood what sharing it would do. I understood that the world would look at it and hear it and reach for the name of the person inside it. And I was not certain I was ready for the reaching to find what it was looking for. She was not who anyone expected. That is the part that changed things when understanding finally arrived in the places it arrived. The Arab world had assumptions about the people closest to me, about who occupied the significant spaces in my private life. And those assumptions had been built carefully over years from available evidence and reasonable inference. They were not entirely wrong, but they were also not entirely right, because the person this poem was written for existed outside the frame everyone had been looking inside. She was someone whose connection to me had been present for longer than most people knew, and in a form that the public narrative of my life had never fully accommodated. And when the poem was understood correctly, when the specific images and the specific grief and the specific quality of love inside it were finally read by people who knew enough to read them accurately, the silence that followed in certain rooms was the loudest thing I have ever not heard. I wrote it for my mother, and the world that assumed it was written for a wife or a lover or someone belonging to the romantic chapters of my story went quiet in the particular way of people who have just understood that the deepest love in a man's life is not always the one they were looking for.